bring us back to?
Yes, we are resuming the agenda at item 2.12, work session, draft 2016 comprehensive plan. If our presenter would please state his name and title for the record.
Stephen Ball, Planning Director with Charles County.
Welcome.
Okay, well, what I'd like to do today is to go through the changes that were discussed last week and proposed, and provide you some details on how these changes would be implemented and the necessary actions that would be required to carry them forward. The proposals would then be presented next week at a public hearing and posted for review. And I grouped these by chapter. So the first chapter of the changes is Chapter 3 in the land use. And the discussion last week included Bryan's Road, Marshall Hall and Marbury, Watershed Conservation District, airport land uses, Indian Head Science and Tech Park, development district boundaries, property on Billingsley Road, and suburban large lot and rural residential districts clarification. And I'll discuss these in some more detail and show you how they would go forward. The Bryan's Road Airport and Indian Head Science and Tech Park, the direction was to designate Bryan's Road as a mixed-use village, change the land uses for the Maryland Airport to watershed conservation, the uses surrounding the Maryland Airport, not the airport itself. Change the Indian Head Science and Tech Park land uses to watershed conservation. We looked at this map last week, and it just showed you some where the sort of the areas are that are not committed or partially committed. And here's another view of that area in a little different format. The Indian Head Science and Tech Park would be changed. The lands around the airport removed from the development district. The remaining areas that are vacant or yellow, brown or yellow would potentially be subject to rezoning actions. The implementation actions also include changing the land use map and rezoning from industrial and planned employment to watershed conservation as part of the comprehensive rezoning, keeping only the airport property for industrial uses. Designate the center of Bryan's Road as a mixed-use village and updating the zoning. Stipulating in the plan that downzoning of those areas that would be vacant would be part of the comprehensive rezoning. Change the tier map from industrial and employment-based from Tier 2 to Tier 4. This is the land use map for that area as proposed by the Planning Commission. If you focus on the area that's sort of pinkish color around where the airport is, you can see that if we show the proposed change, those areas would now be watershed conservation, and the center of Bryan's Road designated for mixed-use village, and the deferred development district would be pulled in to reflect those changes as well. Also, these changes would result in the removal of the airport land use study recommendations, which were part of the comprehensive plan's recommendations for the land surrounding the airport. Marshall Hall and Marbury were discussed as changing the tier designations from Tier 3 to Tier 4 and retaining a rural conservation land use designation for these areas. Here's the Marshall Hall Tier 3 area, and this is the Marbury Tier 3 area. This is the existing tier map. If you would look at the area in the northwest or upper left corner of this area, the orange areas and the yellow areas, so those Tier 2 and Tier 3 would now be going to Tier 4 on the tier map of this area, with the exception of the airport property itself. The implementation actions are revise the tier map, transmit the map to the state, include findings that these are predominantly forest lands, and we would we may need to have a public hearing depending on their comments that we receive. Watershed Conservation District was suggested to change from 1 unit per 10 acres to 1 unit per 20 acres. And that's this area in question. We also want to discuss the remaining parcel that's outside of that area. Get to that in a minute. Revise the text in the comprehensive plan and rezone the district or as part of the comprehensive rezoning. The deferred development district is probably the biggest change that has been proposed. Make the development district boundary consistent with the priority funding area maps. This is the area that's predominantly the outside of the priority funding area, though there are several others that would be affected by this as well. The areas in brown are vacant, and the areas in yellow are preliminary plans that are either partially built or not built at all. And this would be area subject to being rezoned to a lower density aside from those areas that are already sewered and built. This area has about 6,808 acres. Probably half of it is undeveloped at this time. This is the current boundary of the development district as outlined in the orange. And then proposed boundary would look like this, where we bring in the development district from both Indian Head, Bryan's Road, and the western part of Waldorf. And there's also a few other smaller areas right in the eastern boundary as well that would be affected. All those areas would be removed from the development district, include a total of 10,276 acres. So the implementation of this would be to change the development district boundary, stipulate rezoning of the vacant areas outside the new boundary to implement the plan. We would need to work with legal staff to determine which projects have vested rights to enable them to go forward with development or not. And we would revise the priority funding area boundaries to eliminate Indian Head Science and Tech Park, land surrounding the airport, and the area in question south of Billingsley and areas east of the eastern boundary. Another issue that was discussed was to have a discussion on reconsidering the placing of this 1,160 acres within the watershed or conservation district or outside of that district. This is the area that's shown as the hatched area here on this map right above the words White Plains. There's basically two options that you have to consider here. One is to include it as part of the Watershed Conservation Land Use District and rezone it as part of that process, and to amend the priority funding area to take it out of that. And that's what's currently proposed in the draft plan. Your other option is to keep it as a residential land use and zoning, to keep it as part of the priority funding area, requiring transfer of development rights as a new TDR receiving area, or not to require transfer of development rights. Those are your options if you want to have that discussion further. It was noted that the suburban large lot and rural residential need some clarification in the text, and we can do that just by doing some text amendments. Chapter 4, the water resources chapter. The discussion is to include language regarding the impacts of groundwater recharge issues in the future, to verify that it complies with the state requirements, and include language banning of fracking drilling for natural gas in Charles County. And we would implement that through text changes. We have a memo that was previously submitted that verifies compliance with the state requirements, and we would include language that prohibits and policies to prohibit fracking in the zoning ordinance. Chapter 5, regarding natural resources. The discussion is to change densities in all major stream valleys from 1 unit per 3 acres to 1 unit per 10 acres. Change the Mattawoman Creek stream valley density from 1 unit to 1 unit to 20 acres and include Nanjemoy and Mattawoman stream valleys as a new rural legacy designation area. This would require us to revise the land use map for the comprehensive plan, revise the text in the plan, rezone the stream valleys as part of the zoning process, and to apply to the state to designate a new rural legacy area. This is a map that shows the stream valleys extending beyond the RPZ and the preservation areas as blue, and it includes those green areas underneath the blue. These would be the areas. You can see how they come out in finger extensions, which makes it somewhat difficult for zoning. And I just wanted to note that if you're going to do that, you may also want to consider just a straight zoning of the rural areas of 1 to 10 instead of trying to zone around those fingers, since they take up so much of that rural area. And that would be easier to identify the boundaries. The way it is now, we would have to do field investigations for any development to determine where those boundaries are. But either way, we'll make that work. It's certainly up to you to decide. Chapter 10 includes the establishment of the Nanjemoy area in the priority preservation area and the Mattawoman Stream Valley, and includes the generalized stream valley maps on the land use map as I've just shown, and noted that we would have to analyze those exact boundaries over time. And here's a map that shows you the new proposed priority preservation area, including the 3 areas and 2 new ones. And the way we implement this is to revise the text in the plan, revise the map in the plan, and we would apply to the state of Maryland to get certified after the plan is adopted. And then finally, there were a few other issues that were brought up that weren't specific to the chapters, including an implementation schedule for the comprehensive plan and consider recalculating growth potential based on the changes. Been working on the action plan, the implementation plan, and we'll have that for the public hearing. And the staff, we're putting it in short, medium, and long-term activities. And finally, regarding the growth rates, the potential reductions in this plan does not really, in our opinion, affect the growth rate. It affects where the growth would occur. It would essentially move it away from more of the north and western part of the county to the eastern part of the county and to some of the rural areas that would already have development approvals. And, however, we want to note that if you're really interested in reducing the overall growth rate, we would need a new policy to do that, and we would control it through limiting building permit applications. That would be the way to limit the amount of growth over time. And then finally, here's a look at what the new land use map would look like with the stream valleys, with some of the changes in the development district, with Bryan's Road area, and put on one map. So with that, I'll close and open it up for your discussion. We'll be presenting these to the public hearing next week, unless you have other changes you would like today.
Okay, Mr. Ball, just so it's very clear, your presentation today is a result of some of the proposed amendments that were made by commissioners in the last meeting. So I would ask those commissioners that made the proposed amendments if this satisfies and accurately captures what it is that you proposed. Are there any changes or additions or comments?
I would like to thank staff for turning this around as quickly as you did, and I look forward to seeing additional changes from my colleagues.
I would like to echo that. Thank you. It was a lot of work to do in a short period of time. I appreciate that. Okay? Thank you very much.